one of my newsletters, questioned everything. You said you've read everything, all the science, what Dr. Malone has said, all these people, why should they be lying? Why should they all be risking their careers? And you said, and you talked about the pandemic. Well, you can either call it a pandemic or a scamdemic. Both are equally applicable as far as I'm concerned. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I wanted to say thank you very much for inviting us, and I'm really privileged to be here. I'm very pleased to meet them. I met Nick some time ago. It was like really a highlight for me, because when 2020 came and all these bizarre things were happening, and suddenly there was this beacon of light, and we were totally in awe of Panda since that time. So what happened to me, just briefly, is a friend of mine asked me to speak to her father, and I said I didn't do that. It's not my field of expertise. I declined advising any of my patients, but what I did do is, if there was something that was information, I passed it on to them to make their own decision. So she went on for weeks, and she said she's tried everything. She wants to speak to her father. He wouldn't listen. But at least you're a doctor, maybe you can speak to my father. So in the end I said okay, and we had this like informal Zoom meeting, like tonight, maybe if what we say tonight flies out into public. So we're all somewhere in their pajamas. I was having a glass of wine. I followed a man who she also invited to talk, a very interesting man called Dr. Kirsten. He talked about transhumanism and artificial intelligence, all fascinating things that you never knew anything about. And he talked way over his allotted time. So in the end I said, no, I don't think I should talk. Maybe we do it another time. And they said, okay, no, let's do it. So anyway, my English is not my first language, so I just rambled a little bit, but I gave the information, more or less what I knew at the time, and it was very, very abbreviated, so it wasn't like you can say, oh, it's not my field, I'm not speaking as an expert, but I've listened to enough people that you can see what they knew, what they were talking about. I've read a lot of stuff. We were very much not in support of anything from the first day, and then suddenly in a few days this little video recording went public, and the first I knew was somebody called me, the head of surgery at Grooteske, a very nice girl called Elmi Miller, and she said there is this huge problem, all the doctors are phoning her, everybody is absolutely upset because I've done this horrible thing. So I said, I don't know, I've spoken to some people, I'll send you the clip, because by then I had this clip. And the next, I had this snooty lawyer's letter from Netcare, who basically said, unless you say within the hour that you didn't represent us and you didn't represent the brand of the hospital, you need to, your practicing privileges are ended. So I said, I don't have a problem. I didn't represent you. I didn't represent the hospital. I can easily say that. So then they said, but you also have to put it on your social media. I don't do social media, but if you want to, you can do it. And they did indeed, because then it flew, and I immediately actually cut off all communication, because I knew it was going to not be about the issue, but would be a personal attack, which it apparently was, and I fortunately haven't seen any or much of it except indirectly. Now at the moment, at the time I decided to only address concrete attacks which came through the Health Professions Council. That's why I'm so pleased to meet Tim tonight, because it's not based on fact, it's just based on finding a scapegoat. So I maybe need some support in the next few months. I'm waiting now for this to unfold, but I'm very pleased to meet people that actually have an understanding what's going on.
Isn't what they really object to was that you said it was a plan, the pandemic was created for the vaccine?
No,
and
I
not-
said that the virus, no, the vaccine's not there for the virus, the
Yes.
virus is there for the vaccine, but that's very clearly documented because all that research been going on for at least 10 to 20 years before there was any sort of known virus. So I don't think it, factually that is how it is. I hope I have a nice lawyer that can
Sorry, Dr. Forsley, we did ask Nick and Professor Noakes if they were
Yes.
okay with us filming them.
Yeah,
I'm
yes.
Been
happy.
asked.
Oh, you have been asked.
Yeah, no, I don't, I realize, I mean, it's something like this, but I think in a way, I thought it was meant to be, because I would never have volunteered to do something like that, but the fact that you're like thrown off the cliff, I think it was meant to be, because I do think some people at least stopped and said, what is this really about? And I think it did change from people's feedback to me. It did change people that were just going along like sheep, or the guy, or following the man that played the flute over the cliff, paused a bit and said, maybe let's first just see what's going on here. And for that, I'm most grateful. That's all. Is that okay?
Without what sort of research you've done into these cardiovascular events post-vaccine? Because
I think there are so many things, like every single day there's something
a
coming.
young person just dropping dead.
Yes, there's so much because of this, and what actually happened even before that in 2020, March of 2020, we had the 40th anniversary of our medical school class. So like all classes, they scattered across the world. So we suddenly made contact again with people in Australia, people in New Zealand, in Europe, in Canada, and we were more or less all a bit connected again, and people shared information. So I feel even up to today, there's a Canadian group that actually gives a lot of information. There's the American groups that started with say treating the patients. It's a different debate. The Australians was more for how badly they were restricted, and so the damage, I think, is there, and the damage is becoming clearer by the day. Today and yesterday, I have a new little presentation by Peter McCulloch. I don't know if you see it. And there's a cardiologist in the UK that gave a presentation on Monday, which you all probably
Not
saw.
Dr. Asim Mahatra.
Well, yeah, and I think he has this very elegant way of saying things, and I think maybe he'll be a voice that is heard a bit more than other people before him, because he also has the history that he actually criticized what's the so-called, I'm also labeled an anti-vaxxer. So I mean, I think the label of not having been vaccinated is a better label, because anti-vaxxer is purely a label that you're giving, even if you're skeptical about what's going on, whatever is going on.
Suzanne, there was an interesting little vignette around Asim Malhotra. I think that would be helpful to explain.
Yeah.
My understanding
Yeah.
is he starts off being in touch with the anti-lockdown community. He didn't quite, lockdown didn't quite chime with it,
Oh.
but he did it surreptitiously in his medical community. It was not fashionable or not okay to come out against lockdown.
Yeah.
So he was kind of behind the scenes in touch. And when that same community revolted against the idea of mandatory vaccination, safety and efficacy regardless, he pulled back. He thought the vaccines were great, and he recommended them on national television. And then his father died under strange circumstances which he couldn't separate from the vaccine. I think what happened there was his contact with that original community caused him to retain an element of skepticism, just a vestige of it, and it came out. And so that subtle and restrained and refined voice was then found again. That's my theory of it. I could be wrong.
I might just add that he's one of the leaders in the low carb movement.
Yes.
And he's been fighting these things for a long time.
Yeah. But he had this wobble
Yeah, absolutely.
where he left. So I mean that
Are you
that
worried
figures
about
that
your
he would
wife?
be pro low carb and which I'm
Yes, she is.
remember
Would you
that.
like to speak to her?
And skeptical about lockdowns. Fell for the vaccine story for a little bit, saw something tragic in his life and pulled back. It's a
Yes.
powerful voice because he went out saying one thing and
Thank
changing
you,
his
Peter,
mind,
and I'll miss
which
you
as Tim
on
says
at the club on
about
Wednesday.
law of running.
Yeah.
You know,
But maybe it gives him a bit more credibility, the fact that he was, say, if I can use you as an example, you were
Worrying about
a
you.
carb
Must call
pusher,
you when you leave.
and then you saw it's not good and changed your mind. That gives you a lot more credibility if you can say, you know, I've looked at it and I do not advise that anymore. And for him to have made comments about people not wanting to get this and to then change around and doing the research that he communicated very elegantly, I thought.
What was his name? What was his name?
Asim
Asim
Malhotra.
Malhotra. There's a lot of
Yeah,
presentations by him.
He's an esteemed cardiologist in London. I mean, he has
Yes.
a very good reputation, but then so did you.
No, but you know, that's not my field. I mean, that's why I don't want to come as an expert. I think I've listened to more experts and read more papers than I read in my own surgical specialty training time, because the things are just so easily available and one's curious and this. But some things are an hour, 2 hours, and,
Yeah.
and you need, and some things are very repetitive, and it's hard to just switch something off after 10 or 15 minutes. But there's something comes from all people.
can I give you a word of encouragement?
Yeah.
Because like, to me, almost by definition, an expert is a person who's in danger of losing context. They get narrower and narrower, more balkanized, more
Specialized.
focused on this tiny little sliver of reality,
They lose context.
and they start inventing narratives around how that little sliver of reality works without realizing that the implications of their narratives don't chime with a broader reality. That's kind of the tyranny of the expert, is that he gets to be repeatedly cited in this narrow field of expertise, despite the fact that his results and conclusions are at odds with a broader context. So we don't have to worship experts. I mean, I happen to love experts. Nothing's better for me than sitting down with somebody who's deeply steeped in the field and just absorbing what they know. I love that.
But Suzanne is a different type of expert.
She is,
because
clearly.
if you have a heart problem, that's the person you need to go to. And because it's real,
Yeah.
it's, you know, she has to operate on this patient and save that patient's life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what medicine doesn't do. You know, it's not about that. It's the outcomes are less important. In surgery, they're 100% important.
They're 100%.
Yeah. And
they're
that's the
immediate.
problem with those experts
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So you must go. You must go at the.
I'm fascinated because I read in your bio that you didn't actually meet Chris Barnard when he was working. You met him in retirement and you became quite close and
Yeah,
you
we were-
collaborated in various, was it charities
projects,
or
yes.
projects?
I met him really after, when I started training in, what was it, 83 more or less. He was already retired. He was in Oklahoma for 4 or 5 years, then came back in around 88 when I basically finished my training. But he liked me very much. He wanted he wanted that
I
I
can imagine.
We're not I know he always said I was too old for him. So not a problem. But anyway, so we had quite a close friendship with him, and he had a foundation in Austria where he brought kids from Russia and Eastern Europe and from Africa, and I operated on them, but it was more or less his show. So he would come and organize everything, and he would come in and be with the kids and so on. It was actually sweet. I have still from Gorbachev a letter to say thank you for this little Russian child that came here. So it was a really nice period. And then I used to invite him for all our charity functions. I was quite involved with organ donation at the time, and he always came to our functions, and he was a big draw card. So if people would come, people would support it, and he would be the person that really entertains them. And he was always he always had a sense of humor, even at times that he didn't have a good time. When his last wife left him, he was very lonely. So we used to come out at night. We used to take him out for dinner or so. So we knew him very well at those times. But even if it was sad times for him, he always saw the humor in any situation. It was really a privilege to know him.
Yeah, no, he was an exceptional human being. He had his flaws, as so many do, but just hearing him speak on that video.
Can I add a little story there? So it's Sunday the 3rd of December 1967, and I'm in America, and we're driving back to Los Angeles from Capistrano, which is where the Swallows come back to Capistrano. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the radio's on, car radio's on, and it says, a surgeon in Cape Town, South Africa has just performed the world's first human heart transplant.
Yeah. I remember that.
So the next Saturday, that was a Sunday, the next Sunday he appeared on television in America, and he was unbelievable. He was such a good speaker. He was astonishing. So I'd finished my matric, I'd gone to the army, but I didn't know what I was going to do at all. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then in March that next year, so 68, I woke up one morning and I said, you're going to study medicine at the University of Cape Town because of Chris Barnard. Yeah.
It's one of those moments that stick in your mind forever.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I just feel sure, even when he did the operation, he came under a lot of flack. It was quite a rebellious thing to do at the time. I just get the feeling that he would have been one of us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. There's a very interesting book for us that know more or less a bit about medicine, where there was the surgeon in San Francisco, Shumway. He was always the one that they thought he would do the first one. But what the other people did, they were very narrow focused. So Shumway, for instance, would operate on how many baboons or dogs or whatever. But if you've done it once or twice, you can do it. It's an easy operation. So doing it 100 times actually doesn't make you more capable. But other people, he was far better prepared than anybody. So he went into the immunology, went into the rejection treatment. So it's a multi-dimensional field of medicine. It's not just the operations really easy, but the management to actually get somebody through the first month, through the first year, that's what makes the difference. And for that you need a bit broader base. And nobody gave him credit for that. There's this book, I think it's Every Second Count, where the author tried to make like it's a race of who's going to be the first one, but the other ones in the first instance would never have done it. They weren't brave enough, and maybe they also had more restrictions than what we had here. But for instance, he had a donor before which he didn't use because it was a person of color, and he just actually turned it down because he realized that the implications of that would not be favorable. And then when he did it, I don't think he realized he didn't keep his gloves. So later on he said he wanted to take a new pair of gloves and keep it because he could sell it for quite a lot. But he never did that because inherently he was really a very honest person.
I don't know if Marilyn wants to mention a story about Norman Shumway. You don't want to?
You knew him.
No?
Only there was at Stanford.
Conference at Stanford, yeah.
At Stanford, where science and art,
Yes.
and there were quite a number of really interesting lecturers, but he got up and he still hadn't got over the fact that he was beaten too close to the heart transplant. And he went off on some tangent about Chris Barnard and all his, liaisons he had with Sophia Loren and all these. I was so infuriated that he didn't
Give him credit.
It was so sad to see this grown man who's made a life for himself, but he's still hanging on to the bitterness of that.
Yeah. But even his brother Marius, he was also bitter
Yes.
until he died. When I met him several times, it was so sad because I think in a way he was quite supportive of his brother, but he could never accept that it wasn't him.
He worked with, when my husband came across him, my husband went to England for a while and ran an insurance company.
Yes.
And Marius was he used to come and drum up business. It was dread disease. He used to call it up at the pump. And everybody fell for him, hook, line, and sinker. He was very good for business. But he was bitter and he used to talk about the Chris I had to bear.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It was awful. I once sat next to him on a plane in those days
Bittersweet love
from London back to Cape Town. So, you talk a lot to somebody. I never knew him before, but so we had this connection, and it was interesting. Aton knew him while he worked with him in Joburg. But it was interesting also for me as just newly qualified. There was a function. My chief when I trained was a guy called Bruno Reichert. He lived also quite close to here. He was a German, and he, to his credit, brought Chris Barnard back into the medical fraternity, and he had a little function. I still remember at the Mount Nelson. It was the 21st anniversary, 1988, of the first transplant, and then they had something more or less every year. And what really struck me at the time is how apologetic Chris Barnard was for the great thing he did, because all this criticism has just really made an impression on him, and he was never arrogant about that, but he was like apologizing to all his colleagues for what he did, and also the colleagues. If I used to go as a registrar to meetings, then you would always get these remarks like some way. So they would say something about like something personal, and none of those people that had all these comments to make had made actually any contribution. And as a sort of junior person, you just don't have the ability to defend it, and it always didn't feel right to me. I'm sure you felt the same. Yeah.
Can I make it personal again? Because I'm not sure that I've ever told you this story, but and I can't believe that I haven't. But my mother was a ballerina first and a physiotherapist second,
Yes,
and on Chris Barnard's team for
Really?
the first two transplants.
yes, really.
And in the first transplant, and this is where my recollection gets vague, but in the first transplant, he wouldn't allow them near her. He was worried about taxing the heart, and the patient died of like a pneumonia or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And in the second transplant, he wanted that chest worked and everything, and the physios
really?
were on
Yes.
on and off and on and
That's
off,
interesting.
and the whole time, of course, Chris Barnard was chasing the nurses and the physios around her because he was a horrible womanizer.
Really?
That's the story as I received it.
Yes.
Was the first transplant no physio, second transplant lots of physio, and all the time the nurses and the
That's
physios
what
were
it
chased
is.
everywhere.
The second one did so much better.
Is that? I
Yeah, he
mean,
lived like 21 months, I think.
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
How many survivors are there at the moment?
Oh, I don't know. I think across the world, the last time, I haven't done a transplant talk for ages. It was like 4,000 per year, I think, in the US. And not everybody reports to the international database, but everything's slowed down already. I think after the 1990s, we had a really great run in the 1990s. The numbers were growing, the patients were doing well. You know, I have patients from the early 90s that's still alive. It's like 30 years later. And then came 2000, and I mean, we had kids then, so I stepped back a bit, but it's sort of lost that excitement that it had in the 90s.
And the cost probably.
Oh, the cost, I think the whole way society is changing. There are so many boxes to tick, and that people lose touch with being human. It's more corporate than personal. I think that's where the hospital groups lost the plot.
How many transplants have you actually done?
I don't know. I think maybe 30 or 50 or around there. Not so many. I mean, now I do more children, so maybe 1 or 2 a year. But our hospital does maybe 5, maybe 7 a year. It's not that many. But there's a little bit more activity at the moment. So there's been quite a few donors lately, but not all suitable that you could use them.
There's a dark side in the conspiracy theories that comes out at the moment with organ harvesting in China. And despite all my utterances against the wilder conspiracy theories, that, by the way, is one that I think looks like it stacks up.
No, it's a long time already. It's an old thing. It's since the 80s. I mean, I've been involved with transplantation since the middle 80s, since I came to Grevski, and it's always been, and it's real. I think. I mean, for kidneys, it's even worse because people are abducted and they take the kidneys. I mean, I can't say it firsthand, but it's not an unknown occurrence. And then there was also a time where they were considering making it financially rewarding to people to make donations. But it's so grey. It's so grey. I mean, everything is so easily can be abused.
It's hard to imagine the
But
things people can do.
What are we going to do going forward? That's more interesting.
So what are you prepared to do? What are you
Well,
prepared to do?
at the moment, I'm going to fend off the Health Professions Council to the best of my ability, and I'm going to draw in all the people that know what they're talking about.
And how many doctors do you have on your side?
Not many. That is what is so shocking. And I would say in our hospital, there's about 200 doctors, and I don't think 10 has declined this injection. And I mean, some really bright people, but they are worse than people that are solid common sense on the ground.
How many of the 190 doctors who accepted the injection have died?
In our hospital, I'm not actually aware of any. But there's been all those in Canada now because they've had the repeated
32, they said,
injections.
I think.
But I think it's also difficult to assess it because people don't make the connection. So whatever is reported is an underreporting.
So I had a very interesting thing where a director of one of the large hospital groups in South Africa told me that they had no increase in mortality during 2020 for their entire workforce. So all the pot and pan banging, which used to make me want to vomit because it was the opposite of what doctors are, No, I mean, doctors are not meant to be,
You mean the frontline workers in
the
the
frontline
UK?
doctors people in
Here as well.
the southern suburbs were banging pots and pans to cheer the doctors on to work
They
in
signed up
places
for
that
that career.
Yeah, of course, they signed up, and like any decent doctor wouldn't think anything of going into a hospital environment where there are a couple of pathogens floating around. I mean, what are you talking about, you know? But the sorry, lost my train of thought a little bit.
What did you say about the doctors with work?
Yeah, 190. Yeah.
Yes.
So the director was telling me confidentially that had no increase in mortality among staff workers in 2020 and an increase in mortality in 2021.
But that's
I could not get into
That's
Garden
around the
Record.
world.
I'm happy to tell that story as vague enough. I haven't mentioned a company. Nobody's going to sue me.
I mean,
But
how many people in my 71 years growing up, I never knew, and you're my vintage. Have you ever heard of anyone, young person, just keeling over and dying of a heart attack or a stroke? Never.
no, I remember it happening in triathlon and that kind of thing. You know,
But very infrequently.
frequently, and then they would do an autopsy. And they would say, oh,
Exactly.
he had an undiagnosed valve problem or something or other. You know. But now, yeah, there's a book coming out soon, telling hundreds of these stories, and encapsulating the statistics of the athletics deaths.
Yes,
Those are
well,
the pronounced ones.
The elite athletes, there's over 1,000. Well, last time I looked, there were 900. There must be well over 1,000 now, because they're the canaries in the coal mine. They have enlarged hearts, don't they? The ones who do extreme exercise.
But I tell you, there's an interesting little bit in here that also goes back to my original point at the beginning of the evening about skepticism. Okay, inside Panda, there are the people who worry about the spike proteins, and then there are people who worry about the nucleocapsids. The what is it?
The lipid nanoparticles.
Yeah, lipid nanoparticles. And sorry, thank you. There are two profoundly different theories, and the one that I think is actually right is the minority view. Just intuition at this stage. Just looking at it and saying, yeah, what the people who talk about the lipid nanoparticles as being the essential damaging item, that theory looks a little bit more consistent with the broader statistical picture than the spike protein picture. But that's like heresy in our community, because spike proteins are dangerous. And the lipid nanoparticle guys say, the spike proteins will be, we've looked at it immunologically, they will be destroyed by the body very quickly, they're not going to sustain very long, they'll be detectable, but they will not be at damaging levels. The spike protein is not a problem. You guys are barking up the wrong tree. Lipid nanoparticles is a problem, and this is what it does. And I've watched now, just even as I've begun to internalize that message and just to think about it some more and to look at it as with a certain degree of horror, as many of the doctors and scientists who I've been on the same side as and fought a long battle with are now going, oh, the spike protein is a disaster, and it's in the atmosphere now, and we are shedding it, and we are, and this thing goes and does this to the arteries, and that, and that, and that. And I know they have not had the funding to do the science that would allow them to say what they're saying. So all the time I have this feeling that I'll just say it, I think it's a very important point to make. If you want to stick on the right side of this whole thing, we do not make extreme statements. We do not go out there and jump onto every next theory that comes along about damages and horrors and disaster. Just stick with the principles, the basics. And it reminded me at the beginning, you were talking about the safe and effective.
Yeah.
Just even before you get arguing about safe and effective, it's wrong to mandate medical treatment. Okay? It can be 100% safe and 100% effective. We don't mandate it. We don't do that. The fact that it's dangerous and the fact that it's not effective, both of which I believe, I think it's dangerous and not effective, is irrelevant. That's not an argument we should actually use. The argument you stand up and make on your soapbox as loudly as you can is that we have proven time and time again that it is wrong to tee up medical experiments in people. That it's wrong to force people to take something against their will. And forcing people includes all sorts of inducements, taking away their jobs, limiting their access, limiting their travel. That's all wrong. Just make that argument often. That keeps you on the right side, because if you go with the shedding or the snake poison nucleotides in the vaccine or the whatever, you're in severe danger of being wrong. In particular, if you're like me, a member of the general public. You're not going to make that call correctly. 99 times out of 100, you're going to be wrong when you support that. And because there are a lot of people out there who are simply mistaken, and there are also a lot of false flag operations. They set up bogus stories that are attractive to people like us, who are kind of like alarmed at how the world is going. And you can attach yourself to any one of those theories, and you've got a vanishingly small chance of being right. So don't. Just stick with the important thing, which is it's wrong to mandate any kind of medical treatment. We know that. It's only ever been abused in the past. And that's why I like, people come at me for invoking the Nuremberg Code. Okay? They come at me because they say, no, the Holocaust, you can't compare it, it's wrong, it's fundamentally wrong to. No, that's actually where it's at. There was a time when people were forced to do things against their wishes. They were subjected to medical treatments against their wishes. And we learned from that time that no good can come of it. And that's enough. We do not have to make claims about 100 million people or 1 billion people dying, like Zev Zelenko, may he rest in peace, claimed 2 billion people would die from the vaccine. Yeah? Geert van der Bosch has done it 3 times and been wrong, and everybody's a fan. I am okay with him, I want to hear his theories, but he's been wrong 3 times. We do not have to make the claim that loads and loads of people are going to die from the vaccines. It doesn't seem to be the case. I made the point to somebody earlier that Sweden, 87% vaccinated, has had no excess mortality since their vaccine campaign. And they really drilled it. They, for all their virtues of not doing lockdowns and everything, they went ahead and pursued a massive adults vaccination campaign. And there has not been any sign of excess mortality there. I believe there are harms. I can see that. But they're not so much that it's visible on the total all-cause mortality scale in Sweden. And you can say, yes, they had a lot of early COVID deaths in 2020. There was a dry tinder theory. There are lots of statisticians can make various refined points about it. But the point is, okay, so at most they compensated for that. If there's harm, it compensated for that. But there's no excess mortality. And the danger then is that everybody goes, we shouldn't mandate vaccines because that vaccine causes harms. And then the harms don't actually show up in the data. And then you've lost your argument. You don't mandate medical treatments.
But there's the other side of that too, of people who refused to be vaccinated and they were vilified. I mean, even the Archbishop of Canterbury said it was your Christian duty to get vaccinated.
And the Pope. Yeah.
And
It's an act of love, he said. You know? It's an act of love, he said. So I have this huge Catholic community that are up in arms, and the continual debate I have with them is, are you telling me that if the vaccine was safe and effective, then it would be an act of love? And I cannot move them, because every single post I get from them is about like this teenager who died over there and this one who died over there. And of course I'm desperately sad for this and that teenager, if it was the vaccine or whatever cause that caused them to die. But you're rather forgetting your Catholic principles if you are eliminating human agency, because Christ taught human agency. You know? And so it's an ongoing debate. Like, they all think of the Pope as the Antichrist. People inside the Catholic Church, like senior ranking officials, think of the Pope as the Antichrist because he's mandating an unsafe and harmful vaccine. As if he were to mandate a safe and effective vaccine, it would be okay. That's wrong. That's wrong.
Well, this is the page I was looking for earlier when this meme, two young masked couples. Some people didn't recognize it, but many others of us did. Some people wouldn't know tyranny if it covered their faces, locked them in their homes, enacted the biggest wealth transfer in history, censored them, made them show papers, and force medicated them. That to me is the whole crux of the matter.
Yeah.
That people I know said, oh, they had to do it. You know, my friend who lives in Florence at the moment, she was double vaxxed and she didn't have, couldn't for some reason, having been in South Africa, the South African passport, update her vax passport, green card, whatever it is, green pass. She was allowed in a supermarket or a pharmacy. She couldn't even order a cup of coffee outside on the pavement. The police came along and asked, I mean, if this isn't fascism, then nothing is. And people criticize this, you know, the media's up in arms about Giorgia Meloni and being alt-right. My Italian professoressa says she's centre-right, so that's the difference in thought. And yet Ursula von der Leyen is the biggest fascist. Lot. I mean, it's a democratic election in Italy. She says there's a way of dealing with countries like that. She won apparently by a landslide victory.
Yeah, but she's still very much in the sway of that whole European community body. So don't attach any hope to her.
No, I've read other things too. I think actions speak louder than words, so we wait to see what she does.
Yeah.
Can I just make a few comments? Because Suzanne and I had a lovely chat about her case.
The electricity's on.
And so this is what I've learned, and I hope I can share it. One of the reasons why I was taken out was because the HPCSA lost the case against Basson. Remember Basson, the guy who did all sorts of things in the board, voted Basson. And the HPCSA could never get him. So they had to take out somebody else. So then they went after me. And they lost against me. So therefore they will double the efforts against Sandra. That's no question. They can't afford to lose two high-profile cases in a row. We've discussed what the claims against you are, and they're completely nebulous, is exactly what I had to face. So how do you defeat that? And I hope that I've been able to give you some advice. Fortunately, Sandra has got financial through the Medical Defence Union, which I didn't have. They refused to defend me, so I had to pay for my own case. So financially, she's fine. And what I've suggested she needs to do is to get my legal counsel to help her, because they know how to deal with the HPCSA. Yeah, and they know exactly what these people will do. And what they will do is they will bring along their so-called experts who are utterly conflicted, as Sandra knows, and my experts will take them apart. They will be exposed beyond belief. And then what Sandra has to do is she has to present evidence for at least 10 days. She has to be on the stage for 10 days, presenting the argument. So what I suggested was she takes the video that she'd been criticized about, and she says, this is what I said, point 1. And then she has a 2-hour lecture on point 1. Yeah. And then you go to point 2 and you have another 2-hour lecture. And what the defense lawyer, the prosecution lawyers in my case, we're having another lecture now.
Well, there's a great defense there, because the one point that they harped upon in your video was the gene therapy story. But they're wonderful video clips of the Moderna and Pfizer executives describing their product as gene therapy. Back in the day when that was sexy marketing, then it became like, oh dear, if we tell the whole population we're trying to inject the world with gene therapy, there's a bit of a problem here. So we've got to do something else. But they're out there saying that, and it's so simple. The executives called it that. But and I say that with a degree of humility, because when I listened to your video, I winced at that phrase when you used the gene therapy phrase. I went, oops, that's where she's got on. And then, sure enough, that's where the criticism came. But then I went and looked a little harder, and you were right.
Exactly. I mean, it's nothing was not I
Yeah.
can
You've
substantiate
done the
everything.
reading.
I read
Yeah.
everything, and I mean, what did we do in 2020? We couldn't really work, so we had all this time on your hands, and all this information was flying around. So then one gets a little bit hooked on it, and it becomes very interesting.
And the problem is that most people don't want to read this stuff. I've sent so much stuff to my sister in Australia, and she says, "Why do you send this stuff to me? It's affecting our relationship," was her response.
But I think Suzanne's responsibility is now you've got an incredible opportunity because the world, South Africans actually support you. Yeah. And so you're not fighting against them. And the more you speak, and the more you talk, and the more exposure you get, this could be a tipping point in South Africa. Yeah.
And
So
when
that's
is it?
You know what? It's completely bananas. How many of the leading voices in the whole anti-COVID story are South Africans?
Yes, and
Marek,
Paul Marek.
you know, Paul Marek, Tess Laurie, yeah,
Hoff,
1, 2,
what's
3.
his name? Hoffy.
Charles Hoffey in Canada.
And there's another connection. There's another connection most you're unaware of, but Asim Malhotra published his paper in a journal that's published in Cape Town.
Is that so?
Journal of
The Journal of Instant Resistance started in Cape Town.
Journal,
Because I started it. That's
the
why.
journals.
When is this called?
I don't know now. They put a date for